Hi, this clip deals with externalities. Um, as you remember from your textbook and the lecture, externalities essentially takes place or are originated when market activity produces an impact on bystanders. And when the impact is negative, of course, you have a negative externality like pollution. And when the impact is positive, well, you have a positive externality like education. So I am going to explain to you what all this means, hopefully to clarify, again, the basic concepts on externality. So let me start first with um, the example of pollution, a negative externality. Imagine that you have a market, you have market demand right here, market supplies right here, and right now the equilibrium right here attained by this market indicates that QM is the amount produced in this market and PM is the price that sellers and buyers agree to exchange this particular output. Now, notice something very important on this chart. This supply assumes, like any other market, that companies only care about private cost. So in their profit maximization process, they are taking into account, of course, electricity, raw materials, labor, anything that is costing them an out-of-pocket expense. However, in the case of some markets, for example, let's say the market for aluminum, agriculture, and others, they produce pollution. And therefore, here is the key to understand negative externalities. There is a line, in this case my blue line, that I am going to call social cost line. And this line is basically capturing all the cost to society, those are the bystanders, that are not paid by the company, and therefore they don't take them into account. But from the social point of view, they should be taken into account. In fact, if companies were taking into account not only the private cost, but also the social cost, the supply would not be here on this black line. The supply would be here, lower. It would shift to the left to reach the social cost curve. Now, if that was the case, notice what would happen. Whatever they're producing, whether it is aluminum or is agricultural stuff, the amount, the socially efficient amount QS would be lower than what the market is producing, and the price PS would be slightly higher than the price the market is currently producing. So in other words, the market would move from this point to this other point if companies were taking into account not only private but social costs as well. They don't, and that's why this is considered a market failure, because this market outcome, this QM and PM, basically tells you that the market is producing more than what is socially efficient, that the market is producing more than what is socially desirable. So when you have a situation like this of a market failure, a negative externality, you need, well, government intervention. That is basically the essence to understand why under this type of scenario, this government intervention is going to take the shape of a tax. Technically, this is called a Pigouvian tax, because Pigou, Arthur Pigou, was a British economist that, well, essentially first came up with this idea. So the government is going to tax production in an effort to force companies to, listen, internalize the externality, which means making sure that these companies take into account not only private but social cost. And the tax, presumably, is going to be of an amount equivalent to this gap. So the tax is not easy to set, but presumably if it's a small tax, the supply is going to shift to the left, but not enough, so they increase the tax even more, and presumably the tax, if it's an efficient amount tax charge, is going to force suppliers to reduce supply until they achieve the socially amount, and of course the price would be higher. So this is essentially how governments deal with a negative externality. They impose a Pigouvian tax. Let me write this down. Pigou, that's the last name, and it's called a Pigouvian tax. All right. Now let's move on to the other case. What happens when you have that the impact of this market activity is not negative, now it's positive? What does that mean? Well, now we need to shift gears to the demand. Notice that in the case of the market for education, and here in the output you may want to think of this as well, the number of students graduating from college, or the number of units exchange, and here in price is the price per unit, of the price per semester. It doesn't matter. This is the market for education. But notice that the demand, the students, it's assumed that they only take into account private benefits, without realizing that when they go to school, when they go to college, they also produce a benefit to the rest of society. When they talk to people, well, they have more informed opinions. When they, basically assist neighbors, family members, friends, well, whether they, more likely they're going to charge for this conversation, but, it's beneficial. They obey laws, they follow guidelines, and so on. So there are benefits that are not captured by the demand in a regular market setting. So similar to what I did before, in fact, there is a line, in this case blue, that I am going to call the social benefits curve. If people buying education were taking into account not only private but also social benefits, they would buy more. They don't, but they would if they were incorporating this into the decision-making process. So the amount produced by the market of education is QM, but the socially efficient amount is QS. And the price that the market charges right now is PM, when in fact it should be PS. So how is this going to be solved, this market failure? Well, once again, in this case, the government intervention that takes place in this type of situations takes the form of, well, you guess it, a subsidy. A Pigouvian subsidy, which, basically means, for the case of education, scholarships, loans at low interest rates, and other types of assistance, financial assistance by governments to increase the demand for education. So the idea is that with these subsidies, with this financial aid, the private demand is going to increase all the way until it reaches the social benefits curve. So the idea is that the subsidy is once again going to help consumers to internalize the positive externality of education. So once again, externalities is a type of market failure, and when that happens, you need government intervention. In the case of a negative externality, this government intervention takes the shape of a tax, so that the supply is reduced, the amount produced is reduced to reach the optimally efficient, socially efficient amount. And in the case of a positive externality, the government implements a subsidy to increase the demand and hopefully increase the amount produced of education. So essentially, once again, when the market is producing too much of a bad thing, a tax is going to bring it back down. When the market is not producing enough of a good thing, the subsidy presumably is going to increase it until it reaches the optimal amount. All right, I hope this helps, and if you have questions, let me know.